To understand how the first atomic model was built, we need to start with the apparatus itself, a cathode ray tube. This is a sealed glass tube with most of the air removed, containing two metal plates, a cathode and an anode, connected to a high-voltage source. When voltage is applied, a glowing beam travels from the cathode toward the anode. Thomson modified this basic setup by adding a second pair of plates inside the tube, positioned above and below the beam, capable of generating a controlled electric field. He also added a pair of coils outside the tube to generate a magnetic field along the same region. With both fields acting on the same beam simultaneously, Thomson had built an instrument precise enough to extract real, quantitative information about whatever was traveling through that glass tube. Here is the elegant core of the method. An electric field alone would push the charged beam in one direction. A magnetic field alone would push it in another direction, depending on the particle's velocity. Thomson applied both fields at once and adjusted their strengths until the two deflections canceled out exactly, leaving the beam traveling perfectly straight again. At that precise balance point, the electric force and the magnetic force are equal in magnitude. This single condition let Thomson calculate the velocity of the particles directly from the field strengths, without needing to know anything else about what the particles were. It was a clever piece of experimental design, using two known forces against each other to extract an unknown quantity with high precision. With the velocity known, Thomson then removed the magnetic field and measured how much the beam deflected under the electric field alone, over a known distance. From this deflection, combined with the velocity, he could calculate the ratio of electric charge to mass for the particles in the beam, written as charge divided by mass, or E/m. This single number became the key to everything that followed. Thomson tested different cathode materials and different residual gases inside the tube, and the charge-to-mass ratio came out the same every time. That consistency was crucial. It told him these particles were not specific to one material. They were a universal component, present inside every kind of atom he tested, regardless of what the cathode or the tube was made from. The measured charge-to-mass ratio was approximately 1,800 times larger than the charge-to-mass ratio already known for the hydrogen ion, the lightest atom in existence. There were two possible explanations. Either the new particle carried an enormous electric charge, or it had an extraordinarily small mass. Thomson reasoned that the simplest and most consistent explanation was that the charge was comparable to known atomic charges, and the mass was the variable that had collapsed. If that was correct, this particle was roughly 1,000 times lighter than even the smallest atom. That conclusion was extraordinary on its own terms. It meant the atom, long treated as the smallest unit of matter, contained something dramatically smaller inside it. Thomson named this particle the electron, formalizing a term that matched a charge already known from earlier electrochemical work. Discovering a particle is one thing. Explaining how it fits inside a neutral atom is another. Thomson needed a model consistent with two known facts. Atoms are electrically neutral overall, and electrons carry negative charge. His solution was to propose that the bulk of the atom's mass and positive charge was spread out as a continuous, diffuse sphere, almost like a cloud, with electrons distributed throughout it in stable configurations, balancing the positive charge exactly. He calculated specific arrangements where electrons could sit in rings or shells within the sphere and remain in stable equilibrium, repelling each other while being held in place by the surrounding positive charge. This became known as the plum pudding model, not just a sketch, but a mathematically reasoned structure built directly from the charge-to-mass measurement and the neutrality requirement. Thomson's model made testable predictions. It predicted how electrons might be arranged for different elements, and it predicted how atoms should behave when probed with other particles. Some predictions held up. Others did not. The model assumed the positive charge was spread smoothly through the entire volume of the atom, with no concentrated center. This particular assumption would later be tested directly by firing fast-moving particles at thin sheets of metal and observing how they scattered. If the positive charge really was spread out evenly, the particles should pass through with only small, gentle deflections. The plum pudding model made a clear, falsifiable prediction, and that is exactly what made it good science. It could be checked, and checking it would force the next major revision of the atomic model. Even though later experiments would show the plum pudding model was incorrect in its details, its scientific value was enormous. It was the first model to treat the atom as a system with internal components governed by measurable physical quantities, charge, mass, and electrical balance, rather than as a featureless, indivisible sphere. It established a method that would define the next half-century of atomic physics, propose a structural model based on experimental data, derive testable predictions from it, and then refine or replace the model when new data demanded it. This is the core process of how atomic models actually get built. Thomson's measurement of the electron's charge-to-mass ratio remains, to this day, taught as the canonical example of how to extract structural information about something you cannot directly observe. Thomson's work established two permanent facts about the atom. It has internal structure, and at least one of its components, the electron, carries negative charge and extremely small mass. Every atomic model built after this one, no matter how different, had to account for the electron's existence and its measured properties. The charge-to-mass ratio Thomson measured is still used today, unchanged, in particle accelerators, electron microscopes, and mass spectrometers. This episode focused entirely on the physics of how that first model was constructed, the apparatus, the balance field method, the calculation, and the structural reasoning behind the plum pudding model. In the next episode, we examine how this very model was tested directly and what that test revealed about where the atom's mass and charge are actually concentrated.